Thank you. Welcome, everyone. This is the unofficial welcome to Entheon Gaia from Rak Razam and all the Entheon Gaia staff to you, the community, the people, and the reason why we're here. So thank you so much for coming, and I hope the next 3 days are going to be very illuminating and rewarding and enriching. And it's been very nice to be part of and to watch the entheogenic community of Australia grow over the last few years, from humble beginnings. I don't know whether it's on dirt dance floors at trance festivals or the Ringwood Library with the beginnings of EGA. So it's really nice that there's more organisations sprouting and continuing that legacy. And it's a very valuable thing that we all do, and it's very valuable to put the horse before the cart. It's very valuable because people are really interested in this material, and it is. It's not just about entheogenic plants. It's really about the spaces they connect us to, and it's about our connection to the earth and about our connection as a culture and what we want to do with that and where we want to go. So I'd like to thank all the Entheon Gaia crew for going out on a limb and creating this space for us all to be here. And with that, I'll start my talk. So this talk is called The Universe Makes Diamonds, which I think is a pretty spiffy title. And we'll get into that in a moment. But the reason I wanted to do this particular talk at this particular event and at this time in our culture and in late or early 21st century and late Babylonian times is that everything seems to be hitting the fan. And I really wanted to sort of address that and to look at, well, what's hitting the fan? Why is it hitting the fan? What is the fan? What can we do about it? What should we do about it? Can we just surrender to it? It seems to be that the universe or the tide of events that we're all going through at this crucial juncture seems to be putting a lot of pressure on us, an incredible amount of pressure on a localized level individually, whether that's manifested in people's relationships or people's jobs or people's micro level lives, or in a macro level with culture, or with a macro level with the planet herself. It seems to be that there's an enormous amount of change coming, and we're witnessing and living through it. But that the herald of change is pressure. It's this intense times that we're living in. So a bit of the riff about the title, The Universe Makes Diamonds, is that of course you probably know that diamonds are made through intense pressure. It takes millions and millions of years of incredible density of pressure for the universe and the natural systems within that to turn coal into diamonds. And so I'm hoping that there's some similar type of alchemical process at work with us, because that would make things worthwhile with all this pressure we're going through. So it brings up the obvious topic. I mean, what is the universe? And also, what is consciousness? What is this process at work that the universe is perhaps working through to put this pressure on us? And how does it all self-regulate? And how does it all come to bear? So from my experiences, and from, I guess, a lot of people who have thought about this throughout history, and it's not just a thinking, it's an experiential type of experience. It's like a knowing, a gnosis was one of the terms for it. It's an ability to connect and to feel, spirit at work. It's to feel that there's something greater than us and the sum of our parts going on in nature, in the processes that we're embedded in and that we live in. Just wanted to point out as well that all the beautiful 3D artwork that I'm using in this talk that's behind me now is by the very talented Bo Dealey, who is here at the conference tonight, and I think his artwork will be on display somewhere over the conference as well. So if there is a universal intelligence behind things, orchestrating things, it appears to be, well, hard taskmaster sometimes, but a loving taskmaster, and things seem to be orchestrated for our greatest good, or so I believe. And this talks a bit about that. Before the 21st century, in the early 20th century and in the late 19th century, there was a spiritualist movement. There was a wave of intellectualism and a wave of experientialism and a wave of people thinking and researching for themselves the idea of spirit and the idea of philosophies. A lot of things evolved rapidly in Western culture at that time, and we're sort of living in the legacy of those early eras. And one of the philosophers that I came across in my research is called Henry Bergson. And you might know this quote. He has a famous quote from one of his books he wrote in 1907. The book was called Creative Evolution. And he's a French philosopher. And his quote was, "The universe is a machine for making gods." It's a very bold statement. And these days, I think we'll probably have a little bit of a wrinkle with the word machine, because we're getting beyond the mechanistic sort of idea of things. But in the early 20th century, when he came up with that phrase, it was a very potent meme that he released into the culture at the time. And it was basically, one of the first waves of this understanding that we're not just in an environment that we can rape, pillage, and plunder, that we can use for, post-Victorian era, for all the resources they needed to build the Black Iron Prison, as William Blake called it, all the cities and all the ways that we live now. But the universe is, and that nature herself is alive and is an organism, and it's a very bold statement that to this day a lot of people in the mainstream sciences would not stand by. Here's a quote from Henry Bergson. He believed that there was a living force that drove evolution, an energy behind the wireframe of reality that was orchestrating things. He called this force the élan vital, or the vital essence. It's very similar to, I guess, a lot of other ideologies where you have animism, or this idea that there's, an essence in things, a spirit in things. But coming in the post-Victorian era, it was one of the first waves of this resurgence of this idea of spirit. So he considered that the élan vital and this idea of the vital essence was basically the thing which would manifest itself in the world. And in that manifestation, there was a process that he also called novelty. And novelty is a term I actually came across from Terence McKenna. And a lot of his ideas actually come from some of these early 20th century, late 19th century philosophers. There was quite a lot of them at the time. There was Henry Bergson, there was William James, who we'll get to in a bit. There was William Buck. There was quite a few different intellectuals and philosophers all working on these different ideas of what the world was and why it worked as it did. So in the late 19th century, early 20th century, we were still, philosophy and the dominant ideology was still promulgating this idea of a mechanistic universe, of a universe which was basically a clockwork universe, that things could be explained, they could be measured, they could be really boiled down and reduced to a formula, And so this idea of a mechanistic world really came out of the Victorian era, but it doesn't really allow for the depth of experience and for what's really going on in a world that's full of spirit. So we come to the idea of what is the universe. If it is a spirit-laden entity, if it is this machine idea, which again is a Victorian era concept, and I'll get to a few modern terminologies and concepts for what we would probably describe it as now. On the picture behind me, you can see some pictures that I've swiped off the internet, but you can see this similarity. We've got, like, in the top left-hand quadrant there, we've got a swirling galaxy, and you'll see that the swirl of the galaxy curls round in a clockwise direction, in the same way, basically, that some of the other pictures do. The one on the top right-hand side is a hurricane off the coast of, looks like, North America. And that's going in a certain direction, but it's still the same swirl and it's following the same motion of events. But it's not just in those natural systems going with, to the current that they're in there. It's also embedded in a genetic level, and even maybe beyond that on some spirit level, on some template level. We see here in the plants, the curl of the plants, and in the other one here, it's the same pattern. And, there's different ideas about this. There's the law of the symmetry, the doctrine of signatures, and the things which we know are embedded within nature, which build up the template of what could be into what becomes, and how novelty goes through the process of actualizing, and why do things become something versus being nothing at all. So these are some of the things we really need to think about, I guess, if we're trying to figure out if there is a universal system at work, and it is working upon us at this time, it's trying to figure out why. Why is it all like it is? There's a famous physicist called Freeman Dyson who was writing and working in the 20th century. It's a bit of a long quote here. I'll see if I can read it. He says, "It is a scientific fact that our universe is strangely hospitable to the growth of life and intelligence. Many details of the laws of physics and chemistry seem to conspire to make our universe and the chemical forces to make our universe. If the chemical forces had been slightly different, life as we know it could never have evolved. Our form of life was able to adapt to the universe in which it originated, but there is no way in which any form of life could have adapted itself to a universe that collapsed into a fiery space-time singularity before it had given birth to stars and planets." So he goes on. There's another quote from Paul Davies, who was a late 20th century, and he's still alive now, physicist as well. He said that the scientist, and this is his book, The Scientist as Rebel, "Somehow the universe has engineered not just its own awareness, but also its own comprehension. Mindless, blundering atoms have conspired to make not just life, but also understanding. The evolving cosmos has spawned beings who are not able to merely watch the show, but to also unravel the plot." I mean, it's a miracle. It's a miracle by any other name. And, you know, the physicists and the reductionists and the mechanistic universe people who are still in that small box of Cartesian reality, I think they're feeling the box fraying. I think they know that things are changing, but it's outside the box. It's the great unknown. So 20th century also spawned the idea of quantum physics, which is often bandied about, but it's still an enigma to many people, to physicists themselves. Einstein, grappled with a lot of the projections of quantum physics and the results that he himself and other physicists figured out. Like he, refused to believe that God could play dice with the universe. He wouldn't believe that, no matter what the math said, that could be real. I mean, there was this ego in place which denied what was really going on. But one of the interesting things about quantum physics is that it has this whole idea that the universe is interconnected. The universe is basically, David Bohm is this physicist who had this idea of the unfolding order. And he had this idea that the universe is perhaps a bit like a hologram, that it's projected, like a hologram is projected onto a film or a canvas from some extra-dimensional reality, like some deeper reality, and that the whole world or the whole universe is a projection of moving parts from what he called the implicate. And this is the explicate. This is where everything has become, what it is and what we see here now. But there's a higher level reality. And this is physics. Obviously, it dovetails and it parallels a lot of philosophies and a lot of religions as well. So there's been this marrying of ideas and streams of thought, which are all coming to the same conclusion, which is sort of the death knell for Western mechanistic universe. So, Einstein's general theory of relativity suggested that both time and space are not separate, but are in fact parts of a larger continuum. Bohm went further than Einstein, saying that everything in the universe is part of this continuum, and that on the explicate level, where everything comes from, everything is seamlessly connected. So it changes everything, that idea of reality. There's no separation between everything. Now, the physicists and the quantum physicists have worked out the theories and the math, but on the down and dirty, grassroots of consciousness levels, this is where it's all happening. I mean, consciousness is enfolded in all our reality. So what the physicists were saying is that a quantum projection from an explicate order or from a higher dimensional source is projecting this universe, but what it's actually, that projection, what it is consciousness. It's some level of intelligence that is condensating. It's coming down into matter and it's becoming things. I guess it's almost like you have those new 3D printers. We're getting this ability on our cultural level with the internet and with technology speeding up and getting faster and faster to make real what we imagine faster and faster. So our consciousness, which is present now, can have a thought and can make from our explicate consciousness, we can make implicate we can make explicate from the implicate all the things that exist. So consciousness is the great enigma. Some other people have said, Alfred North Whitehead, who I mentioned before, he has called consciousness the awareness of awareness. It's like trying to find the pattern within noise. Everything can just be noise until you see those magic eye 3D pictures, and it's all just noise until all of a sudden you grok it, you get it, you fall into the pattern. So the pattern is always there, but not everyone has always seen it. Different cultures have different abilities to perceive different patterns. They have different ways they've organized their reality grids, so they can see the different patterns within the greater reality. So, all these philosophers from the early 20th century were exploring different avenues of consciousness. Now, William James was another, he was the founder of modern American psychology, but he was also a bit of a tripper. He was also a bit of a consciousness explorer himself, and an avid nitrous oxide fan. And he was an ally of Henry Bergson's, and they both stood up to this idea of the limitations of the mechanistic universe, of the fact that the mechanistic universe, or this clockwork way of things were working, isn't enough to explain what's really going on. James wrote a book called The Pluralistic Universe in 1909, and he said in that book, he renounced the intellectualist method and the current notion that logic is an adequate measure of what can or cannot be. He had to give up logic squarely and irrevocably as a method, for reality, life experience, concreteness and immediacy, what you will, exceeds our logic. It overflows and it surrounds it. Which is very true. And there's some really good examples here of what they're saying about consciousness. If we have these consciousness receivers in our heads called brains, I mean, there's this whole idea of, the mind is separate from the brain. And in the mechanistic universe, they believe that the brain is what it is. It's all there is. That the brain is grown as part of the genetics. It has the thoughts. It has consciousness. And once the brain goes and the body goes, that's it. Game's over. That's the mechanistic universe. So James and Henry Bergson and others said that doesn't really sit with them. There's ways beyond that. If you use the analogy, their cutting-edge technology in the early 20th century was the radio. So they said, if you have a radio and you go through all the dial and you get different frequencies, you'll get different information coming in. But if you damage the dial and you can't pick up different signals, it doesn't mean they're still not there. And if you totally destroy the radio, well, it's not picking up any signals, but it doesn't mean that there's still not radio signals out there. In the same way, the same analogy, we're saying now that in a non-mechanistic universe paradigm, the brain is not just a producer of consciousness, it's also a receiver. And if it is a receiver of consciousness, as well as a transmitter, then consciousness survives and is independent of the brain itself, which is a huge leap for people in the mainstream to understand. It basically means that consciousness itself, if it's not embedded in the brain, is non-local. And if it's non-local, in physics terms, if it's non-local, it means it's everywhere. If you're not local in space-time, then you're outside of space-time, you're in the wireframe underneath everything, then it's everywhere. It's like it's in everything. And so that seems to be where this path of thought is leading. Another talker who's going to be here at Entheon Gaia and doing a talk, I think tomorrow night, is Dennis McKenna. And Dennis and quite a few other modern scientists as well have posited this idea of the brain as a receiver of consciousness. Dennis had a good quote from an interview I did with him back in 2006. He said, if the brain is a receiver of consciousness, then perhaps consciousness itself is a singularity point, much like black holes, where energy is compacted so densely in on itself that it collapses. That collapse in the brain may be what causes consciousness. So this whole idea of a singularity point is very interesting because in physics, the singularity point is where I guess things begin or things end, in the sense that it's beyond the normal event horizon of space-time. It's this special conditions where things collapse in upon themselves and become able to happen. So we know that, as above, so below, and we're looking at the pictures before of the swirling galaxy and the shell and the plants, and the way that the universe has the same ability to manifest itself on different levels of existence. So you'll have the same natural systems at work, even if conditions are slightly different, whether you're on Earth and in the biosphere or out in the cosmos, the same principles and the same energies are at work. So in that sense, we know that a singularity, if you go all the way down to the micro level, you get to the atomic structure, and then beyond the atomic structure, you get to the quantum level. But at some point, you get so far down, we can't measure, and there's basically the unknown, but it's a singularity point. Like the whole building block of everything we've got here is probably a singularity at the same level as the macro level on the universal level, where we have the black holes, which, by the way, seem to be the latest astrophysics findings, seem to be at the center of every galaxy. It seems to be at the center of every galaxy is a black hole. Like it's the center of an atom. It seems to be that nature, as above, so below, again, is using the same principles and the same forces are at work. So I'm bringing in this idea to get a bit deeper cosmic as well. Black holes as singularity points are very interesting. And I had this thought the other night. What if, the whole galaxy is almost like cloud computing? We're talking about a mechanistic universe, and we've talked about radios and all these old 19th century terms. We've got so many potent 21st century terms now through computers. We've had, a full few decades of computer linguistics embed ourselves in our consciousness. And language itself changes consciousness. So by being able to understand, not just say uploading, downloading, but to understand distributed consciousness, to be able to log on to Facebook and see thousands of your interconnected tribe at the same time is getting very close to digital telepathy. But what it's really training ourselves to do is to understand this distributed consciousness. And so one of the current fields of computing is cloud computing. So instead of hosting everything on your hardware on one computer, you upload everything to a server and to a cloud, so it's there on the net. It's omnipresent, just like consciousness itself. So I was having this thought, if everything's like as above, so below, and perhaps the structure of the brain and the structure of the galaxy is similar, maybe galactic cloud computing, and the cloud is all life forms, and there's this dimensional layering as things come into matter, and they go through this Bose-Einstein condensate. They actually, condense down into becoming something, but instead of being up in the Akashic or hanging there in a template. But it's almost like if consciousness is embedded in everything and it's in the cosmos itself, it's almost as if there's these nodal points between galaxies and between the whole universal smear in this giant cosmic cloud computing mechanistic thing again, but it's on a quantum level. We're coming into this idea of black holes being a singularity of consciousness as well as our own consciousness itself. So I want to go from the macro to the micro. So if we have this idea that consciousness originates beyond our brains and consciousness is in everything, it's also not just random. It's not just seeded from here to there. It's actually coming in from larger galactic levels. It's almost like a cosmic ecology. You have the idea of something like condensation or water vapor, and how you can't see any water around, but then all of a sudden there's moisture in the air. There'll be rain. Rain will come down. It'll go through the ground. It'll do what it needs to do in the earth, and then it'll be absorbed back up again. It's a cycle. And it seems to me, again, using the same analogy above and below, on a galactic macro level, consciousness itself may be experiencing this type of transition. We may be going, consciousness coming in from galactic center, from our local galaxy hub, into the stellar chain of the stars and the planets, into our biosphere, into life on Earth. So humans, animals, plants, all sentient species have different levels of consciousness. It's almost like, the Earth is a womb. The Earth is this crucible to hold the potential for life. But why? Why? If this is like the hardware and consciousness is like the software, it's almost like all the different species are like a satellite dish. It's like we're receivers of consciousness, but all the different brain states from the different species are tweaked to a slightly different level in the radio frequency dial, and we're all bit torrenting. We're all getting this bit torrent from galactic center, and it's then put together again down here, and then the pattern forms. The pattern forms, the culture goes wild, things start to evolve. So, what if the planet creates the hardware, the species, to host the software, like bit torrenting from galactic center? It's like we're all file sharing this larger program. And this is where I believe that some of the things like entheogens and the plant tools come in as receivers of consciousness to get this larger signal. They help us not just receive the signal, but expand upon it. So if you look at Mother Earth, there's this whole idea, Entheon Gaia has the word within it, Gaia, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. James Lovelock was an ex-NASA scientist who coined the term in the early 1970s from the Greek goddess of the earth. And again, it's a really potent meme to encapsulate this idea as the planet, as a living organism, and as the mother, which again, it goes back to the tribal, indigenous understandings of the world. So Gaia seems to grow species. If one species dies off, and by the way, there's been something like 3 mass extinctions of species on Earth before, and science basically says now we're living through the 4th. We're going through, they're not unprecedented times. This does happen regularly in larger slices of time, not in his story, but in larger geological and planetary time. But what I believe is that they're just the biomass. They're just the physical shell. All the creatures that nature creates, she creates for a reason. And I believe they're just the hardware. So I'm starting to get into this idea of receiving consciousness and what the hardware does with the consciousness it receives. So I remember once in Peru, between ayahuasca sessions, just being really open to this whole web of life and to be really not thinking about it, not intellectualizing it, but to be really open on a heart space, to be open. And when you're in the space, I know that you know. When you're receiving a greater signal, and it's not just a mental thing, when you're getting it, when you feel that web of life, kinesthetically in your soul, you're connected. And when you're connected on that level, you get nature, and you're part of the wave of nature and the flow of nature and the greater consciousness. It's like a mesh network is another computer term. If the internet was to go down, and the internet's not meant to ever go down, but there's these things called mesh networks where the more people that pull their nodal points together, the stronger the signal gets. So if there's this great biomass die-off happening in front of our eyes with culture, with the earth at the moment, I'm not worried, because I believe that what it's freeing up underneath the shell of things is the potential for new things to come forth. The consciousness is pooling together into this reservoir of imminent change. So, what do plants, frogs, humans, insects, and all those different species that nature grows have in common? Maybe a few things, but the one I'm thinking of is dimethyltryptamine. It's been recently reclassified as a neurotransmitter. It's a bit like nature's vegetal browser. I call it, Google for the vegetal internet. It's very unique. I mean, it is a neurotransmitter, and think of it, neurotransmitter. It's transmitting neuronal ability again. Nature threads this through all the dominant species, all the plant species. As far as I know, most of the animal species, insects have it. If you've been into an entheogenic space on DMT, you may have encountered insect creatures. They seem to be in there as well. It seems to be like this, to use another computer term, like a chat room, or it's like this centralized space where all these overlapping consciousnesses are placed, and the one thing they all have in common is dimethyltryptamine. So as a neurotransmitter, it seems to be something that nature's threaded through everything to allow it to talk to everything, to interconnect it, and if we think on the quantum level, which is one step above the biological level, if everything was interconnected and if the parts were contained the sum, the blueprint, and of the whole in the part, and you had to then implement that on a biological level, you'd have to put something all throughout nature to interconnect it. And it's done that with dimethyltryptamine. So it seems to be from a biological to a quantum level, that may be the bridge. So, 5-hydroxytryptamine is another scientific name for serotonin, and serotonin is one of those other very important neurotransmitters. Dimethyltryptamine is 5-hydroxytryptamine, and it travels down the serotonin pathways. It's just very interesting, this whole idea of how the holographic matrix communicates with itself and how it self-regulates from the chemical level, the biological level, up to the quantum level and other levels as well. So all of these conjectures on my part come from, I guess, my intuition, and a lot of them come from my intuition with plant entheogens. What Henry Bergson was saying back in the 19th century was that intellectualism is not enough. The mind itself is not enough because it's limited. And there's this whole idea that he coined about intuition. And he promoted this idea of saying that, you know, there's things that the intellect can't grasp. If you've never been near water, how would you know how to swim? You know, you have to go into it. You have to experience it yourself. You may have that feeling, that intuition, but you have to go into it, and you have to experience these things to really flesh them out and then realize what is possible. So a lot of these ideas I'm having are sort of clustering together concepts that are starting to seem very probable. Previously, they've maybe been very disparate, and we've used different terminologies coming from mechanistic universe to the quantum and all the biological. But we're living in these rapidly accelerating times where I really believe it pays to listen to your intuition. You know, the more tuned in we get to what's happening, the more it potentiates, and the more you work that muscle, the more intuition will serve you in the times that are coming. So psychedelics and entheogens engender intuition. You know, one of the great things about them is that they're ego dissolving, and the ego is great for many, many things. You know, Aldous Huxley and other people had this idea that what psychedelics are actually doing is getting rid of the filtering valve that the mind uses down here for survival. So we have the potential within us to unlock the brain and unlock the receiving satellite dish of our own consciousness and receive a deeper signal. But we don't, or we haven't in our past, in the last few thousand years of his story. And maybe we've had to keep that reducing valve on and focus on what needs to be done because it was all about survival. And I guess over the course of, you know, history with different tribal cultures, they kept one little toe in the water where they were focusing on survival, but they had someone, you know, the village shaman or some medicine people or plant people who would help with the tools to unlock that consciousness again and go back to the full mind at large. So it's a bit like, well, the brain is a finely tuned organism. If you have something like nicotine, the nicotine receptors. I remember smoking mapacho cigarettes in Peru as part of you know, ayahuasca rituals, and mapachos have 18% nicotine, and they're very, very potent. And you feel the full rush of nicotine come on, and there's this burst of, like, you know, receptive ability. In the same sense, I believe that psychedelics, when they dissolve the ego, they're helping empower and deepen our own intuition, and that too is like a pathway. So the more we use these tools of the plants, the more we're deepening those pathways to open up and receive more of the consciousness that's coming in. So there was a study done in 1966 by Clive Baxter, and he did this infamous study on plants where he got he got a polygraph machine, like a lie detector machine, and he did readouts on plants with it. So he did the electrical activity of plants, and he wired them up with little electrodes, and he put them on there, and he read the plants with I guess some of the cutting edge machines of the day to see what they were saying, and he was able to verify for his level of standards that there was something going on. And from his readings of plants, from the polygraph readout, he could say that there was a level of primary perception happening. The plants themselves were actually giving off an electrical activity, and there was some level of consciousness in there. Now, that's just normal plants. As those of us who have been in entheogenic space might have experienced, there's an even deeper level of intelligence or mind at large within plants. There's this whole idea of spirits. So in the shamanic world and indigenous cultures, they believe that the plants and the earth and even the mountains and rocks all have spirits within them. They have, again, this animist idea of this, not intelligence, but a spirit, a consciousness that's within all these things. This is in the Amazonian tradition, of course, as well. So when you go on a lot of the dietas in the Amazon, when you are giving up and abstaining from the electromagnetic pollution, from thinking, from conversation, from red meat, pork, alcohol, sugar, sex, all those things. All those things are very acute and are very affecting your sensitivity, your own biological matrix. And as we know, the body is 90% water, and we're actually electromagnetic beings. So the more we give up all these things that are affecting our electromagnetic ability, the more we can tune in our receiving consciousness to receive the signal. I was going to think that I was friends with a shaman in Peru, Kevin Furness, who was a Western student, and he encountered some difficulties. This whole idea ideologically in the Western idea, are plants sentient? Can you talk to plants? There's this whole ideological hump to get over, this idea of plant consciousness. It's one thing to say that plants might be sapient, might have a rudimentary awareness of their environment, and we know that they do engage with their environment. They do have influence and understanding, and they open up and receive the light, and they close down in the dark. But it's another level entirely to go to the next level and say that plants have a mind. Plants are able to communicate with us. But the deeper you go into Dieta, and the more that you cleanse, and the more you refine your own ability, then the more those subtle signals can be heard and they can be picked up. So this whole idea of the shamanic revival, Terence McKenna had the idea of the archaic revival, and part of that is the shamanic revival. And what we're seeing now in Western culture all across the world is this understanding of plants as healers, plants as tools for consciousness, and this idea of opening up to our true potential within. Why, though, is all this happening now? I mean, it's yet again at the end of a world age. There's been so much talk of 2012, and we've almost survived it. We've almost got to the end of it. A very brief encapsulation of it. The Maya culture measured time in many different calendars, many different calendricals. The 26,000-year orbit that they measured that's coming to an end in December 21st, 2012, was the orbit of the galaxy, of our travelling around the galaxy. So the planet revolves around the sun around the Milky Way solar system, and the solar system around the galaxy, all orbits within orbits. And the grand cosmic orbit of 26,000 years is what takes for us to go in that full orbit around and to be directed and fully pointing towards the galactic center again. We've been pointing at galactic center for quite a while, but we're coming up to this crescendo point where we're focusing back at the center of the galaxy. So it comes to this idea again of the Mayans. For them, it was 2012 was just that was a Western idea. That's a Western label. They called it 0.0.0.0.0, and it was that moment when one grand orbit finishes and another grand cycle begins. And so what we're pointing at this time, as we're coming to the end of December 21st, 2012, is galactic center. Now, the Mayans had a name for what's at the heart of galactic center. They called it Hunab Ku, the womb of the Great Mother. NASA just confirmed in 2002 that at the center of the galaxy is a black hole, which is a bit like a womb. The black hole drinks in everything eventually. Everything goes into the black hole, but it also spews out galaxy-wide jets of plasma, which, like when a bushfire goes through a forest, starts to germinate, and that's how the whole star systems are born, from black holes. So it is very much like a womb. So interestingly enough, as we come to the end of this one world age and the beginning of another, and we're pointing up to galactic center, we're coming back on Earth, we're coming to this idea of this shamanic revival. Why? It's almost like there's this supercharge of energy coming from galactic center. It's going through the galactic nodal points, it's going to the sun, it's affecting the sun, it's affecting the Earth. It's being absorbed by all the entities on the Earth which are conscious, including the plants, especially the plants, with their relationship with chlorophyll and absorbing sunlight, and it's transforming. It's like all life on Earth is the hardware, and even with the consciousness, is a great transformer to something, like the energy coming in, the signal coming in at this time. And, in the last generation, we've all seen this tribe, all of us, who are into the plants and into this idea of healing and into the idea of connecting with something greater than ourselves, of reconnection with the Earth. So at the same time as we're coming to this this plateau of our cultural experience with the plants and with the idea of consciousness. The whole planet is coming to this plateau and this target window of opportunity with galactic center and with the larger cosmic ecology that it's all interconnected with. So the pressure is on. At the moment, we're being bombarded by cosmic rays. The magnetic field is changing. The natural galactic ecosystem is heating up. And all around we can see pressures and extremes culturally on a macro level and a micro level. You might have seen this picture just recently. New York just had what they called a Frankenstorm, like a Frankenstein storm, like the mother of all storms. We're seeing terms like, once in a lifetime or once in a century extreme weather events. We're seeing all this incredible intensity of energy that's really just embracing the earth at the moment. And what I believe is all this is meant to be happening. All this is happening for a reason. All this is going according to plan, despite the intensity and despite all the trauma and all the drama. It's almost like the birth pangs. There's been a lot of metaphors for that. There's something moving through us. There's something moving through the planet at the moment. When you're in nature, you can only see the wind in the trees or on the water. You can't see the wind itself, but you can feel it. We can all feel, like the wind, that something is happening now. Something very potent is happening at this time, and something right on schedule. And so in the larger level, there's got to be this surrender. There's got to be this ability, not for our egos to chase the moment, not for our egos to try to control and try to figure out what to do, but to go with the flow, to go with what Mother Nature is intending to happen, and to let go of control. Or so I believe. So Terence McKenna also had this idea of the time wave, which involved this idea of novelty coming in, and as we come into this 2012 target window, things seem to be speeding up. I'm not sure about you, but I've been really feeling this extreme quickening in my personal life and also, in the culture as well. It's that one thing leads on to another, and it's like a dominoes falling. It's that as one thing happens, it sets up the conditions for the next thing to happen and the next thing to happen. And we mightn't be watching, but out there, all this change is happening. And, the water's rising, the frog needs to jump. It's like things are coming to a head, things are boiling on planet Earth. And the time wave says that everything works exponentially. So as we go further into the last bits of 2012, things actually exponentiate, like double the amount, then double the amount, then double the amount, which would be interesting because it seems to be, doing a quick scan of the culture, things are speeding up to that level as we speak, and more people, even in the mainstream, are realizing something's up, and it's not going away. They can't deny it. You can't be an eschaton denialist any longer. So if something's happening, and we've got to trust our intuition, trust our relationship with the plants, trust that things are going according to a greater plan, and we're all part of that plan, it can often sound, a bit like wishful thinking. But if you've ever been part of that flow, when you slow down and when you actually go with the events that are around and not try to control them with the ego, and again, the plants have been helping us nurture to this level as a culture, to let go of the ego and of the mechanistic sort of mind, you can get to this ability where things, almost like the wind, you can flow through things without the impediment, without the heaviness, without the ego trying to control things. So there was a really good story recently, amongst quite a dark story. I do believe that the universe is shaping everything and all the pressure that we're going through for an ultimate reason, for a reason that is for our best outcome. The Hopi, I believe, have a saying. They say, the current or the river is moving very fast now, and don't try to hold on to the edges. Just let go, or if you try to hold on, you'll be swept away. But go with the current, go with the flow, and just flow and cruise, and you'll end up at a shore. You'll end up where you need to be. The earlier this year, there was the quite horrific Aurora shootings in America at the Batman premiere, and I had this little quote here from one of the victims who survived the Aurora shootings. This is the thing: it's like we can all be going through such terrible tragedies, and it's like there's a tragedy on one sense and a miracle on another, you know. And because we don't often have the perspective in our linearity, in our consciousnesses which are going through these one steps, we can't see the bigger picture. But sometimes we hear of examples where we go, oh my God, that is like so statistically unbelievable. We call it a miracle, or we have a word to describe it, to put it away in a shelf and not to think about it. But I do believe that these potent times we're in are all happening for a reason, and the universe is doing it to shape us for the greatest outcome and for the greatest good. And so, in a way to back up that, I'll just read you this story. The Associated Press reports there was a victim of the Aurora massacre called Anderson. 3 shotgun pellets hit Miss Anderson's arm, and another went through her nose, riding up the back of her cranium and hitting the back of her skull. Her injuries were severe and her condition was critical. The doctors prior to surgery were concerned because so much of the brain had been traversed by the bullet, but she was saved by a miracle birth defect that had been there that no one could have anticipated. The doctors explained that her brain had, from birth, a small defect in it, a tiny channel of fluid running through her skull. Only a CAT scan would catch it, and it was exactly the point of this deflect where the bullet hit. Like a marble through a small tube, the defect channeled the bullet from her nose to her brain. It turned around several times and came to rest at the back of her brain. In the process, it missed all the vital areas. I mean, this woman, just get this, on a linear time scale, let's get this right. So we're led to believe it's a coincidence that she was born with a birth defect, the exact shape of the bullet that was in her brain from this horrible Aurora massacre 22 years after her birth. So that is a statistical anomaly on one level, or it could be a miracle on another. And it could be an example that the universe is really out to help us. So Henry Bergson actually had this idea of effect and causality. And he was saying that, it doesn't happen in a linear sense because what we've described previously, that consciousness is omnipresent, it's non-local. And because it's like quantumly interconnected, things from the future, or when we're inside the box, seems like the future, can actually affect the past as much as the past affecting the present and the future. Because it's all basically one grand hyper object. If you were to step outside space and time, if you were to step up a dimension and look at it, you would see this object. It's almost like those little cutout dolls you make when you're a kid and you pull them all out in a string and then you put them all together as one again. Are they one? But they're many. That's space-time. It's the past and there's the future and it's all one. And interestingly enough, I've had different visions, actually not on any entheogens. It was actually on a stone I got from the Amazon, from deep in the Amazon in a hot spring, searching for a magic piedra, one of the magic stones. And I slept with it one night when I was in Peru, and I had it on my forehead. And it's recounted in my book, A Shamanic Odyssey, but I had the most profound psychedelic experience from no psychedelics at all. And I had this vision 3 times. And it was like showing me this thing. And it's basically this hyper object. It's this idea that all space-time is like it's like, magnetic tape overriding itself. There's a canvas, and that's what we see as existence. But all of it is intelligent, all of it is aware, all of it is alive, and all of it is conspiring with all the other bits of it for the greatest outcome. It's like all the bits there, it's like the wind on the water again, just rippling and overriding itself. And then a new history is formed, and a new history, and it's like it's continually rubicing through space-time and changing itself. And it's a bit beyond our monkey minds at the best of times, but I do believe that, to not be trapped in linear time and not trapped in this idea of causality within the normal boundaries of space-time. Causality happens all the time from an omnipresent sense. So I'm getting near the end here, and I've got this wonderful quote I found on Facebook, and it says, "Life always gives us exactly the teacher we need at every moment. This includes every mosquito, every misfortune, every red light, every traffic jam, every obnoxious supervisor or employee, every illness, every loss, every moment of joy or depression, every addiction, every piece of garbage, every breath. Every moment is the guru. And that's by Charlotte Joko Beck. And I believe that's true, you know. Walt Whitman, the famous poet, said, "I do not see one imperfection in the universe. I do not see one cause or result lamentable at last in the universe. The whole theory of the universe is directed to one individual, namely to you. The universe works with you and for you. It is not your enemy." One last thing. So basically, what I'm getting to in a nutshell is all the pressure we're feeling, all the stuff that's going on planet Earth, whatever is happening, it's about letting go. It's about surrendering to the moment, to the trust of it's all going to be okay. And not only just okay, it's all perfect. Because the end result of these millions of years of pressure is a diamond. This perfect, flawless, beautiful work of nature. Just like you. There we go. Thank you. I'll just talk.
Rak, I'm just a bit struck with some of your descriptions at the end when you were talking about the bullet going through the brain and stuff like that. The ideas that you're talking about, the way you're expressing them sounds very similar to something like intelligent design, where you're saying, how could this have all just happened by itself?
I totally believe in intelligent design. I mean, the thing is, isms get appropriated by culture, and culture's a cult, right? So just because one cult uses the ism or what may be a valid, very valid perception, doesn't mean the perception itself is wrong. I believe in an intelligent creator. I believe the intelligent creator is you. And you, and you, and you, and you, and me, and all the yous, and us. I believe, you know, in a holographic sense, if there is a source, if there is a creator source, where is it? Why is it? How is it? And that's what we're all figuring out. And some of the terminology is before. It's not just intelligent design, but think about it. If there is a source, why did it transmit itself? Why did it fragment itself? Unless it is something like pan-galactic BitTorrenting. And it's then bringing down here again, it's transmitting across, you know, impenetrable voids of comprehension. But I totally believe in intelligent design. Absolutely. I wouldn't say I believe in a you know, Roman Catholic dogma, the world was created 6,000 years ago with the dinosaur bones at all. But really, I believe that, you know, there's an intelligence in nature, or nature is the intelligence. And what I believe, the nature of the planet is only one nature amongst many natures. That, you know, life exists through the entire universe, and that the conditions for life become probable in certain sectors of the universe. And then when the conditions are probable, it's like the panspermia theory, life finds, and the seed finds the womb planet, and Bob's your uncle. But I'm willing to dialogue about it. I don't know. Again, as I say, I work from intuition, and as a writer, I get very mythopoetic, and I find, you know, metaphors and riffs, and I cluster bomb and put things together, and sometimes, like a super hadron collider, sometimes things work, and sometimes there's no facts in them at all.
Does anyone else have any questions for Rak?
Come on, anyone? Down the front, young lady. Come on, I want an 11-year-old question. Stop me. Summer?
If you were a superhero, what would your special power be?
Shit. I am a superhero! And this is my special power. Actually, okay, well, I'm going to riff with that one a bit. I think the best superpower I can imagine is something that we all have the abilities, they're all basically encoded within us. But, you know, that interconnected web of life thing, when I have felt fully connected to the web and part of the web, and that wholeness and that completion and that joy, I mean, you know, if within the DNA, some of the things which happen on ayahuasca, some of the people believe that, you know, some of the visionary components of it is because you're accessing your DNA. So you're going into your whole DNA ability to traverse through your genetic heritage and your history, and all your ancestors and all their abilities and all their memories, and also, excuse me, also all the other creatures of Earth. Like if you go far enough back, we're all connected. We're all one. We've all come from a single cell, and we've just kept growing and growing. But the best superpower of all, I think, is consciousness. It's awareness of the fact that we're all one and that we're all interconnected. Is that yours, Sima? Great one. You're a superhero too.
Does anyone have any further questions for Rak Razam?
Yeah, Rick, just the idea of the best outcome. Do you think that humanity maybe has a bit a restricted idea of what the best outcome could be?
Totally. Well, again, it's because I think humanity has this egocentric attachment. You know, in the whole, I guess, Buddhist sense, they say don't have an attachment. You know, it's like, you know, the whole village gets carted away and gets killed, and one survivor doesn't get carted away, and they say, oh, that's a good thing. And they say, maybe. And then the survivor's there, but then something happens to him there. You know, it's like we're attached to outcomes. We're attached to survival. We're attached to wanting things and desires and egotistic sort of things. And that's the human level. And we want those things because I think we've forgotten what our place in nature is and what we're really meant to be doing. Like, I do wonder if when we let go of the ego and when we're in this egoless state and connecting to all things, a lot of people come back from those entheogenic experiences with a renewed joy and a renewed sense of not just connection, but wanting to then do something for the world, wanting to do something for their family or repair their relationships or do something better, you know? And if that's an attachment, well, that's probably okay, but I mean, it's that desire to help others, which I think some of these entheogenic experiences can engender. But in general, I mean, it's the isms again. I mean, if you have the cult of Western culture, its attachments and what it wants from life and what it says is the white picket fence reason for existence is very shallow and meaningless. So if we put that to one side, I think that there could be a whole lot of other outcomes that we could envisage and imagine and dream in, you know, as a culture. If we are satellite receiving dishes of consciousness and we pool ourselves together in a mesh network when we're in a tribal sense, it's like we become then, you know, supercomputers, parallel processing together. Imagine that. You get a huge mega tribe together. Maybe you're on an entheogen, maybe you're not, but if you're on an activating thing and you've gotten rid of your egos together and you're in a circuit and you create that circuit of energy with the right intent, which isn't like we want to win Tats Lotto, but like we want to help the planet or you tell us what we should be doing, and then that intent and that attachment to want to receive more from the planet herself, that'd be great. I could see us blossoming and opening up like this satellite dish. I think that would be the next step.
So we probably have time for one more quick question.
I don't have a question, but I'm awed by the way Terence, like you, woven all that together. Magnificent. Yes.
Thank you, Richard. Well, you know, I like to say about Terence as well is that Terence may have passed physically, but he is now a distributed consciousness. Terence is literally, he's been at every festival I've been to for the last 15 years, on the wind, in a song, in a sample, on a video screen, in a book, in some talk, in a word. As a meme, as an idea, Terence lives on, you know, within the tribe, within the greater tribe. And on the internet, I hazard a guess, he must perhaps be the most represented individual. I don't know. I mean, there's no one out there who has as much content as Terence. Spliced up, reformatted, YouTubed, in everything. And the memes are percolating. The memes are saturating. And, you know, I'm a product of Terence's memes, and I think a lot of us are. Even if some of the ideas weren't right, that's perhaps not, you know, that's not saying they have to be right. But if he makes you think, and if I make you think, that's the true joy. That's the beauty. You know, that's the thing I would say thank you for. Thank you. I'm going to go now. Mr. Ray Thorpe.